Dude, they keep winning. The Dallas Mavericks bounced back with a 122-111 victory in Mexico City against the Detroit Pistons. Here's a quick fun fact for you right off the bat in this video. The Mavericks won 9 road games all of last year. This, I know it was in Mexico City, but technically Detroit was slated as the home team in the matchup. This constitutes a 9-2 record on the road for the Mavericks this season. They have already matched their road victory total from last year. And we are not even, 25 games into the season at this point? Okay, about 25 games into the season at this point. The point is, this team is strongest, where last year it was by far weakest. That is pretty impressive to consider in that regard. In this game, you have a lot of history being made here. You have Luka extending his 20-point, 5-assist, 5-rebound streak to 20 games. The only player ahead of him in NBA history is Oscar Robertson with 2 such stretches, a 25 and I think they said 21 game stretch of that nature. Luka has the most since the NBA-ABA merger. Oscar still has a couple ahead of him, but still insane what he's doing in this regard. In this game, Luka nets his second career 40-point triple-double. He puts on a show. It's the most points by a single player in a Mexico City game in NBA history. It is the first triple-double in a Mexico City game in NBA history. This was a show for Luka, and he showcased throughout the night. He was getting pretty loud and persistent MVP chants throughout this game. And yeah, when you're shooting 14 of 24 from the field, 6 of 13 from 3, you're dishing out alley-oop jams to KP and to Dwight Powell, and you're finding guys constantly just beating double teams and beating the Pistons in the pick and roll. Yeah, you're going to start turning some heads, and there was never a doubt who the best player on the floor was. Now, I know before the game, KP greeted the crowd speaking Spanish, and that's great. And Blake Griffin attempted to kind of offer something in that respect, but didn't go over near as well for him, nor did the game. We'll get into that in a minute, but this was a game of runs here. Dallas was in pretty good position until Detroit, when Luka had to step out in the late second quarter. Detroit went on a big run. With 4 minutes left in the first half, Detroit had built a 58-51 lead over Dallas. And from that point, Dallas went seek and destroy for a little bit. They go on a 14-point run, 14-0 run to close out that half. It carries over into the third quarter. Dallas essentially takes what was a 58-51 deficit and turns it into a 71-58 advantage in this game. But Detroit, to their credit, they entered this game shooting as a team 39% from 3. That is number 1 in the NBA, and those shots eventually did start falling, and man, when they did, Detroit clawed almost all the way back in this game. Now, I don't want to say all the way back as in like, oh, dude, it was a one-possession game. They got back within 9. Dallas had built an advantage up to about 23, 24 points, and the broadcasters, Darreck Kirby and them, were kind of like, oh, this is getting out of hand here. This is, I think he just kind of a little quick to shovel fresh dirt on the Pistons' grave in this case. And it came back because, yeah, Luka checks out of the game late third quarter, as he typically does. And from that point on, yeah, the Pistons went crazy. Derrick Rose hits 4 threes. Very, very good three-point shooting team overall are the Pistons. Kennard hits a couple times. Actually, Kennard only had 8 points. He actually had a very underwhelming game here. Blake Griffin, 1 of 10 from 3. He had a brutal game. Again, we'll get into that. But the Pistons, they clawed back and got it down to 9 points before Dallas regained firm control of the game. Yes, they win by 11 points, but they didn't want to have to play Luka in the fourth quarter at all. They ended up having to because even though the bench eventually got to the point where they weren't hemorrhaging, it still wasn't controlling the way they wanted to. And so Rick, and in part just playing to the home crowd that wanted to see him, not home as in Dallas, home as in Mexico City crowd who wanted to see Luka, let him out there, and Luka just continued putting on a show, getting all the way to the bucket, giving a couple dunks, getting his triple-double. and just making sure this door was firmly closed in this game. Shout out as well to Seth Curry, his best game as a Maverick in stint number 2. 23 points in the first half for him. The man was straight fire in this game. It's not fire, but we're going to roll with this. Explosions. Oh no, it breaks my board though. Alright, we'll bring it back. Point being, Seth Curry, career high for most points in a half. Any half. He does that in the first half of this season, first half of this game. It was his season high in the first half he accomplished. So for an entire game, first half, 23 points. Hadn't had a game where he scored that much this year. He ends the game with 30 as well. 30 points in 34 minutes, 7 boards, 4 assists, 11 of 15 from the field. And just in case you think he's only a 3-point marksman, yes, he's 6 from 9 from 3, and that's great. That's brilliant 3-point shooting. But I like the 11 of 15. He found ways. You saw a little bit more of that combo guard side of him that we haven't been allowed to see a whole lot of this year. But when he broke out in Dallas the first time, you saw a lot of that. You saw him controlling a lot of these games and his fingerprints over a lot of this. And I feel like Rick really did a good job recognizing in this game once he got going, I need to keep him out there. Now, to be fair, he only got 1 shot in the third quarter, and that was in like the final 30 seconds of the quarter. I didn't like that so much, but I did like that he got a much healthier dose of minutes than in the fourth quarter to kind of round things out. So other than that little bit of shakiness, I'm really, really pleased with this game from Curry. I'll be honest with you, man. My man, Justin Jackson, 44 Jacks, this was a brutal game, I think, for him. He ends up 21 minutes, 2 points, 2 boards, 1 assist, 1 of 6 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3. There were a couple instances where he just got flat out beat, it looked like, on defense. He was biting on things. He fouled, obviously, a 3-point shooter. A little bit of a questionable thing, but he put himself in that position. Other times he was just blowing right past the pump fake for a 3. And it was during that Detroit comeback, and you would see him miss a corner 3, come down, and he'd make up a bad play on defense. Then you'd see him miss another 3, and then you'd see him foul a 3-point shooter, and you're just like, dude, like, this isn't your game. I am a huge advocate for you getting more minutes. You got a healthy dose of minutes here. This was not your night. Sometimes that happens. I'm not going to panic. Speaking of which, speaking of not panicking, Kristaps Porzingis, the jump shot continues to elude him a little bit, but I loved how physical and aggressive he got in this game. He gets 3 blocks for the game, and pretty much all of it is during that third quarter when Dallas just takes firm control. Obviously, that started at the end of the second quarter, but it carried over into the third quarter. Like I said, they built up a lead over 20 points, I think about 23 points, and that was a lot to do with KP's influence because Detroit had 39 points in the paint in the first half. I don't know what they ended up with for the game in that capacity, but they were owning that in the first half, and KP anchored things down, got a couple swats in there, swatted Blake Griffin, swatted Derrick Rose. I can't remember the other guy he got in that case. I want to say it was Brown. And after that, you saw Detroit kind of shying away a little bit from attacking the rim, and they started settling for those threes. Now, they're a team, again, they shoot threes great for the year, but it became a live by the 3, die by the 3 kind of thing. They were loading up on those shots, and they weren't falling for a stretch. Now, obviously, they got them going, and it allowed them to carve it down into single digits again. But still, this was a very big impact that KP brought in this regard. And he was going at guys, too. Like, the best play of his season, you saw all the great lobs from Luka, including some that looked like Luka threw the ball 12 feet in the air, and KP still with one giant mitt takes it down from the top of one of those pyramids and just dunks it on Drummond or something like that. But the best one was his last dunk where he pump fakes the 3, crosses his man over, and then goes at Andre Drummond and posterizes him, gives him a little bit of that sour mash face on the way back. And that was the play of, I think, KP's season, honestly, to this point, because it shows fearlessness, competitiveness, it shows explosiveness, and we've seen KP when he does drive in a lot of cases, how he'll feel the contact and he'll just kind of flip the ball up, And it's one of those shots where you're just like, did you really think you were going to make that? Like, it looks like you're trying to exaggerate for the contact, but you're not. There's no soft touch around the rim to really have a chance at making that. And rather than do that, which I think Drummond might have even kind of anticipated, KP's like, nah, man, I'm going to freaking yam this on your head, and there's nothing you can do about it. That was brilliant. That is to me, continued resurgence from him. I know some people are getting frustrated, and I'm tired of addressing this every video. Coming back from this, it's going to take, I know, it's 20 months since the injury at the start of the year. He's had this stretch now. There are people who are frustrated with it. In terms of active on-court play, it's probably going to take about a year. Even my expectations, the more I've read about this, the more I think even my expectations that, by January or end of January, he would really have turned that corner back towards his old form. I think you'll continue seeing steps in that direction, but there's going to be nights where you got a couple steps forward and a step back, couple steps forward, a couple steps back. It just depends. The point is, you see that explosiveness from him, and you hadn't really seen him go that aggressively at the basket since, frankly, the play that blew out his knee. So I'm encouraged by that. KP, I love what you did in this game. 30 minutes, 20 points, 8 boards. Drummond's a big dude, and he gets a lot of boards, but KP, I felt like, held his own reasonably in that regard. 3 blocks, I said, 8 of 18 from the field. 0 of 5 from 3, that's not great, but better at the line as well, 4 of 4. Good game here. Dwight Powell, I thought, had himself a pretty good game. Let's talk a little bit about the Detroit Pistons here. I mentioned earlier their three-point shooting prowess and how this was a game of runs. Andre Drummond, 34 minutes, 23 points, 15 boards. Now, I think Drummond had... I don't think he hardly scored in the second half. I want to say he was basically on par in that. Let me see. I took a screenshot at the halftime stats for him. Let me take a look at that. He didn't do a whole lot, though, in the second half, and that was pretty surprising to me. I want to see... No, son of a bitch. I don't have that. Regardless, Drummond didn't do a whole lot of damage at all after the half, and that opened the door for Dallas, I feel like, to really take firm control here. He ends up Drummond with 15 boards and assists, 10 of 14 from the field. That's pretty nice, obviously. 3 of 6 at the line, 1 block, 3 steals. Here's something about Drummond. I'm becoming more and more interested in Drummond. While I'm interested in Drummond, the interest in Blake Griffin has dropped off a cliff. But Drummond, he's the last 2 seasons apparently been in the top 10 in blocks and steals. That adds a whole new element to his game that I just didn't appreciate enough before, I acknowledge. So I'm all for adding potentially an Andre Drummond type. I just question what the assets required to get him would be. Now, I also mentioned the Blake Griffin and that interest dropping off a cliff. Blake had off-season knee surgery. He dealt through basically the back end of last season with a troublesome knee injury, and he played through it, and he played the best basketball of his career. He's not been very good this year, and you saw his explosiveness that was so trademarked to him for years with the Clippers. It's not there right now. His elevation is not there. Blake Griffin, 30 minutes, 10 points, 5 assists, 3 of 16 from the field, 1 of 10 from 3, 3 of 4 at the line, but Blake Griffin, man, he did not have a very strong game at all. And the fact that he was settling for so many three-point shots was bewildering to me. Like, Blake Griffin is a dude who, that was always supposed to be the icing on the cake that he added just within the last couple of years to his game. The best element was always supposed to be his post-up game, his driving game, all of that. And you just don't see that right now. And for a guy who's got like 3.5 years left on his contract, and you're hearing the Pistons want pretty heavy assets for him, you're just like, no. Are you kidding me? Like, there's no way I'm giving up a first rounder when I got to take on 3.5 years of this very questionable looking contract right now. And what made him so special doesn't look like it's there yet. Again, I don't want to be a hypocrite. You got to give him time to come back from that knee, just like I've been saying, hey, it's not like his knee was a... Oh, sorry. Video froze there for a second on the screen, and I was afraid that it crashed. You got to... Lost my train of thought. Damn. You don't want to be a hypocrite in that regard. You want to say, hey, I know Blake's not coming off an ACL, but at the same time, he had cleanup surgery on his knee. I think the meniscus specifically. I could be wrong on that, but there is something lacking in his game right now, and he'll slowly maybe round back into form. But you got to think about the injury history this guy's had, the mileage on him that he's had as well. And to me, that's just not worth it. It's not worth looking at for a big acquisition. I don't think it would help this team right now. I definitely don't think it helps us win. I think a Drummond would certainly do that, but, that's a different story. Also for the Bulls, Derrick Rose off the bench. He's been fantastic off the bench this year. He'll get his shots, man. 26 minutes, 19 points, 4 assists. I said he helped spearhead that Detroit comeback in the late third quarter after Luka went out. 7 of 16 from the field, 5 of 10 from 3, 2 steals, 3 turnovers. He had himself a nice game. I really do think he had himself a pretty nice game. I like Derrick Rose off the bench quite a bit. The question with him is always just, the last year, it hadn't really been much of a question regarding to his health. But I just don't know that it's his style of play hasn't adapted as much. I still love me some Derrick Rose. I think it's a great story seeing him bounce back and all that, but it's not anything. It's not the type of player the Mavericks need to look at, I don't think. So, not that he's even available, but I do think he's on like a 2-year deal with Detroit. I could be wrong. I digress. Let's get down to the bare numbers here. Dallas shot 51% from the field compared to 45% for Detroit. Detroit, I said, shoots 39% as a team from 3. Well, they were 36% tonight, 15 of 42. Dallas, meanwhile, was 16 of 44, also 36%. Even at the stripe, 16 of 23 for both teams for 70%. Now, Dallas continued its great trend of fewest turnovers for the league, just 11 tonight. One thing about Dallas is while they don't turn the ball over a lot, they don't force a lot of turnovers. I've noticed that in particular in recent games. Detroit was 7 turnovers. Dallas wins the assist battle 25-23. Nearly by 20 rebounds. Dallas killed Detroit on the boards 52-34, including 11 offensive rebounds to just 5 for the Pistons. 5 block shots for Dallas, 3 of those coming from KP, 1 coming from Dwight, and I think 1 from Maxey as well. Detroit got 2. Detroit got more steals than Dallas, 8-4, and committed fewer fouls as well. So this was a really nice win for Dallas. Like I said, Dallas won 9 road games all of last year. Technically, Detroit was considered the home team in this matchup, meaning Dallas is now 9-2 on the road. They have matched in just barely over a fourth of the season. They have matched their road total in terms of victories from last season. That is insane. Dallas is 17-7 on the year. That's got them currently at the time of this recording slotted in 3rd place still in the Western Conference. And now they are going to have themselves a real brutal stretch here. This is one of those really character-defining stretches for the Mavericks because the Western Conference is really stacked. As great and phenomenal as this stretch has been for Dallas, the space in terms of games separating like 3 and 12 really in the Western Conference is not very broad at all. If Dallas or any team in their position around this point in the standings were to hit the skids a little bit, it would put them in a very difficult position, and they'd have to work back from that. They'd have to spend some time working back from that. So Dallas, as they're going to come back home now to face the dreaded and much hated Miami Heat. From there, they have to go to Milwaukee for a date with Giannis. Then they have to come back to the AAC and host the Celtics. The 76ers will be a road game, and then so will the Toronto Raptors. So basically the top 5 teams in the Eastern Conference are your next 5 games. Have fun with that. That's going to be tough. We talk about how much better the West is overall than the East, but when you're talking about the top of the East, first of all, I think that margin this year has balanced out more than ever. In fact, if anything, I think maybe pound for pound, the East, in terms of head-to-head record, is slightly better than the West, but I could be wrong about that. Feel free to fact-check me on that. But this is going to be a really big character-defining stretch for the Mavericks. Just like early on, they had a couple things. They had a stretch there that looked brutal, and it ended up not being as bad as we anticipated coming into the season, but Dallas ran through that pretty smoothly. I think it was a 4-game stretch there, and they went like 3-1. So other than that Clippers game, they performed beautifully. And now we're going to see how they can do for that with the other conference here. This will be a very, very significant stretch for them as they get basically towards the end of the month. There's a few more games left in the month even after this. But after this 5-game stretch, obviously. But this is going to be a very, very interesting stretch run here before the new year for the Mavericks. I am incredibly excited to see how we match up with the Eastern Conference's primo class, their elites, if you will. But yeah, that's going to do it for my time, guys. I'm DDP. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Dallas Prospect, leave a comment below, and remember, every legend was once a prospect. Salute.